G'day everyone and welcome to the GameDay Squad Aussie Rules Fantasy Show. I'm Pitty and alongside Haz, we are the Fantasy Bros. We've partnered with GameDay Squad to bring you everything you need to know to succeed in GDS Aussie Rules this season. And for this episode, I'll be joined by Janath from Supercoach Swordplay. Janath, how you going, mate? And thanks for joining us for this live Round 5 preview show.
Thanks, Pitty. Very, very happy to be on. A pleasure to be talking GDS AFL with you because I know we often pick our brains in the Discord. How better to do it than do it on the live stream?
Absolutely. Let everyone hear our thoughts and obviously get the thoughts of our listeners and viewers as well. So again, mate, thanks so much for giving up your time and jumping on to chat fantasy footy with us. And again, for all our viewers and listeners, just make sure you've subscribed to all our Fantasy Bros socials so that you don't miss a thing this season. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, TikTok, Facebook, and Insta. Just make sure you search at Fantasy Bros AU. And if you're a new coach, of course, it's not too late to get started in GameDay Squad. Ditch whatever fantasy sports platform you're playing, download the app for GameDay Squad or visit our website and create an account to use that promo code FBAR26 and you'll be rewarded with 3 9-player common packs just for doing so. And now, Janath, before we get into round 5, mate, it's important we do take a look back at the week that was for round 4. Do you want to talk us through how you went across the different competitions, mate? And we'll talk about our stars and scars soon. But yeah, how'd you go?
Yeah, happy across the board, mate. So finished first in the under-22s. My star, which we'll talk about very shortly, is Archie Roberts. He was an absolute pleasure to watch Seagull against the Doggies on Sunday night. And yeah, across the standard comps, about 10 to 15 in the top 10 to 15 across most standard comps. Got bitten by Sean Manor. I think it might have been to you that I was venting about Sean Manor. And I was just like, oh gosh, this guy, like, it was just an incredibly hard watch. Got bitten by the Team English injury as well. But when you win a comp in a week, you can't really complain with too much else. So that's the week. Plenty of good players, but also some tricky ones there with Man and English in particular. Yourself?
Yeah, there were a few getting around, weren't there, those bullets? But yeah, pretty good round as well. I'm very happy with sort of how I ended up at the end, just given all the carnage that did happen across the weekend. We obviously had the late outs as well in terms of Nick Dacos and Ed Richards. So they both nearly caught me out. I think Haz and I got onto it right at the last second. So it just, that just threw a spanner in the works. And I know a few people got caught out there. So that always does suck. But yeah, finished, my best was sort of 6th in Challenger. So I was really happy with that. But I think, again, I was sort of, 8th in Classic and 13th in Contender as well. So pretty solid week all around. I just fell away in the 22s competition, unfortunately, this week.
You're still in the cup?
And then Haz had a good week.
You're still?
Yes, still in the cup, mate. This is my best run in a GDS Cup. Yeah, since I've started playing. So again, I said we're taking it like the Brisbane Lions, just one week at a time, and we're knocking off a hoodoo each week, and we'll see how we go. We got up against Bomber Blitz on the weekend, so I was happy to get another win there, and we move on. And I wrote down who am I up against this week? Stealth.
Ooh,
so Stealth will be a really tough battle. So I think, I'm nervous for that one. So, but again, nothing to lose. We'll go into, actually, there is something to lose. Probably an all-star card is what you can lose this week. That's up for grabs. But in terms of how far I've come, I've got nothing to lose. So, good luck to Stealth. Not too much, though, of course, as well. And Has got up in his cup matchup. He beat Tom. So he was stressing about that all weekend. And Tom, you should have seen him. His bottom lip was on the floor when Grundy puts up his massive score. And he basically had declared, Tom's got me. He's going to win. And it's funny how fantasy footy can change so quickly too, especially when you don't know how other coaches are doing. So he's through and he's happy about that. And he faces Jay Mayhem this week. And so I've seen his name at the top of leaderboards too. So let us know in the chat. Are you still in the cup as well? And Janath, you're still in, aren't you?
Still in. I do have Not a Horse, a regular in the Discord there as well. So I think now in the round of 64, the going gets tough. We'll see a lot of familiar faces going around, as well as a lot of high ranks and seeds matchups.
Yeah, some good matchups too, absolutely. And we've got Mel's Misfits in the chat. G'day, Mel. Great to have you on board again. And Izzy as well. Izzy's in there. G'day, mate. Thanks for tuning in again. And Silver Pigeon as well. Again, let us know how you guys went in the cup. Are you still in? Are you out? What's your season looking like? And in terms of our stars and scars, what a star you had there, Archie Roberts. Like, that's an incredible play. I flagged that last week just for that Western Bulldogs matchup as a pod for your standard comps. Didn't have the guts to go there myself when I really probably should have. But he was just pigging it up back there, wasn't he?
What a star. Love him. Love him. There were some others that I mentioned, probably more standard ones, but as has there Zach Bailey. Like what a player he is. He just can rack up marks and kicks, and also Justin McInerney, a couple of forward pod options there that really stood up when we needed it this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually surprised last week by how many coaches actually didn't play as Zach Bailey. I was looking at the sort of played percentages in StatsLab, and I was just shocked at how far down he was. So even this week, he's the 11th most popular forward, sitting at 15.5%. So yeah, he was really a pod last week, more so. And then he puts up that 133, which again, if he's at your 7th or 6th forward spot there, like that's just gold. Getting one of those scores, particularly on that first night of footy for that Easter long weekend. So yeah, he has a star. He was my star as well, and Max Gawn too. I spoke to you before. We actually didn't play Grundy in our classic squads just because we've been burnt by that matchup in the past with Grundy, and his last two hadn't been great against them. So we went, look, we'll play him in other comps, but we think we'll just lock in a Maxi Gawn here and a Timmy English, what we thought would be two safe picks. And yeah, Gawn just did what we thought he would. Like, it's incredible too. Like, we sort of think Witsy's a bit of a tough matchup, and we'll get to talk about Witsy later on when we get to the rucks, because Brodie Grundy comes up against Jared Witts this weekend. Typically been a tough matchup in the past, but just for Gawn to, put up that 139 to get us at least in touching distance of a Brodie Grundy was, just incredible. Probably saved our rounds, so to speak. And mate, on screen there, the scars, Jordan Clark, I'm sick of him, I'm off him. Haz has got him in there tonight to talk about because he comes up into a good matchup, but I'm so off Jordan Clark. We'll talk about that later. And Lockie Blackiston is my scar. I didn't play him, but he's my scar because he's taken out my two rucks in the past 2 weeks, and he's taken out most GDS coaches' rucks in the past 2 weeks. So he's my big scar at the moment. And again, it's not because I'm playing him.
And who does he come up against this week?
Yeah, Max Gawn, and that's an interesting discussion we're going to get to later on. And I know there was a bit of chatter. Yeah, it feels like that at the moment, doesn't it? Just get him out. Get him out. I don't know what he's doing there in the first place, but just get him out. I tell you what, you know who's stiff to not get a mention here? Zach Butters. Zach Butters is very stiff. And I probably should have put him in, but he's another player I'm just so off. Like to start the year, he's had a green mile. He's had a great run of fixtures, and he's only put up one good score for us. So he's lucky he got to the score he did on the weekend. Otherwise, he would be on this screen, but he will not likely be appearing in my squad this weekend. I need to set a standard over here at running amok, mate, and we're not going to accept that mediocrity. So he's out. He's in the twos until he can show us a bit of form.
Well, look, I think the stars might align for Zach Butters this week. Personally, thinking about big matchup at Adelaide Oval, a semi-soft midfield, but whether that translates to GDS points, we wait and see. Some are saying he might be playing against his new club next year as well. So Roscoe, but yeah, we'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, exactly right. And then Silver Pigeons in the chat as well. English, Manor, and Clark cooked me in a few squads. Absolutely. And as I said, if you left Dacos in there, I know Tom left his All-Star in Classic, and if you left an Ed Richards in there too, if you missed that one, there was some real carnage getting around this week, unfortunately.
The Dacos one was so late. And I think that was the biggest issue with it, is like, if you weren't on the ball or watching the footy, you probably wouldn't have picked that one up. Like, it was just such a late out. Feel for those that got stuck with him in the end.
Yeah. Man, I was literally putting my my 7-month-old daughter to bed, so I was sort of rocking her, putting her down, and Has flicked me a message, Dacos out. I was like, oh no. So I had to flick that one on the fly. But super late. And it was just a weird one anyway, like to talk about. Like, he's super proppy. Didn't look very good at all in the warm-up. But anyhow, mate, let's move on. Round 5, we've got all 18 teams playing, which for a lot of us, I think we're thankful that we've got our backline back in order. We've got a lot of players that we can choose from, those really high rarity cards that some might have had on a buy. They're all available, and this might be a big moving round for coaches with so many options available, and could be big moving in one of two directions. So our fixtures are as follows. For our primetime fixtures, we've got the Crows up against the Blues on a Thursday night, and we've got the Pies up against the Dockers. And all these fixtures are played in South Australia. Just for all our non-sort of AFL viewers, this is Gather Round this week, so every game is played in South Australia. We've got fixtures at Adelaide Oval, Norwood Oval, Barossa, a few different grounds like that. So The Saturday games, we've obviously got 4 games there. We've got the Lions up against the Roos, the Bombers up against the Demons, the Swans up against the Suns, and the Hawks up against the Bulldogs. And for our FantasyBros Sunday Showdown competition, we've got 3 games, 6 teams to be choosing from. We've got the Cats and the Eagles. We've got the Giants up against the Tigers. And as we mentioned before, with Zach Butters potentially playing off for some money at the end of the year, we've got the Power up against the Saints. So lots of good fixtures there we can be looking at. Have you got any thoughts initially, Janath, about that or around those competitions, or are we happy to move into those defenders?
Yeah, I reckon we can. I just think looking into a couple of lines particularly. So for the primetime fixtures, picking Ruckman is quite difficult. And it's like you got Jackson there, but you got 2 rucks that are sharing, even 3 with Pitternet as well. McAndrew's going to be the sole ruck. So it'd be a real make or break in the ruck there. And then the same goes in the Sunday Showdown as well. There's not too many recognizable ruckmen across the board. Like Jordan Sweet is on the board there. Tom DeConning, Rowan Marshall. Like it'll be quite interesting to see which way coach go. Even a Mitch Edwards, really friendly matchup, but he's in his 4th game of AFL or whatever it is. So it's really interesting one for us to pick our ruckman this week across the board, even in standard.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be a great conversation when we get there as well, mate. But just moving on, in terms of our defenders for the week, we had Tom in the chat as well there. If anyone's not in that Discord server, make sure you do. It is unreal what goes on there. You can, hit up the trade table and acquire some players for your club, and everyone's super friendly and welcome to help out. So if you're not involved, make sure you do. But yeah, Tom just mentioned in there that there's a lot of good matchups going around this week, and are we going to trust those players on screen who are our plug and players who've been getting the job done, but some of them might not have an ideal sort of matchup? Or are we going to go and hunt those other players with that better matchup? So, Janath, I'll throw to you first, mate. We've got Zorko, Josh Dacos, Jack Sinclair, Lockie Ash, Lockie Whitfield, and Naz.
Yep.
Is anyone from that list currently someone you are looking at intentionally fading because of the matchup, or do you think they're all sort of players to consider this week?
It's probably less as much as I want to fade them, and more I'm worried as to what the ramifications of fade in them is, if that makes sense. More like the calculated play. So take someone like an Isaiah Wangani-Malera, not playing off of halfback, and his scores are probably reflected that he's probably been in the low hundreds, about 110 sort of range. And so you could realistically fade him for a Dan Houston, Jaden Shaw, Tom Stewart type and probably get away with it. But what happens if Naz is moved into defense? They're coming off the bye. They want to get a bit more ball movement from behind the ball. It's one of those things where probably not willing to take it on as of yet. But to back in those plug-and plays, he's probably the one. Josh Dacos as well, nursing a bit of a shoulder issue. And I think he spent the last bit of the game against your boys on the bench, actually. Yeah. And Houston was the one that sort of finished the game off quite strongly. So another one there that maybe in and out. I'm pretty confident on the other 4, though, being like lock and load them in this week. Pitty, where do you sit on those 6 plug and play options?
I agree with you from that point of view. I think Sinclair was one I sort of looked at the start of the week against that Port Adelaide matchup. I was like, is that someone we might be able to look at elsewhere? And if you go back and look at his historical data, he's actually scored really well against Port Adelaide, and he has that key distribution role out of the back line for the Saints. So I just went, I have to lock him in. I'm not going to do that. Zorko, I'm not going to do that. Ash and Witt against the Tigers, I'm very happy with. Naz, again, like you said, mate, heaps of upside. Port actually leaks some points in the midfield too. So if he is rolling through the midfield or if he just gets that license to run like he normally does, like he could actually pop a huge score this week because he's hasn't been amazing to start the year, and this could be the week where he turns that around. So I'm not tempted to fade him. So yeah, it's probably a Dacos. Like, do I look at a Dacos or someone who's not there that's not in our 3 options, who's definitely an option, is Jaden Shaw. I was going to put him in that plug and play. I think he's one that you could definitely be looking at as well this week up against the Giants. The Giants don't give up as many points as we normally would think to opposition defenders. So yeah, he's one that I'm also pretty keen on to play. But yeah, I'm not really going to fade them. And in terms of Josh Dacos, I think just because they were getting absolutely smashed, Nick wasn't there, he was nursing a bit of that injury, it probably made a bit of sense just to go, okay, like sit off for this last part. There's no need for you to be out there doing more than you should. Like, we'll just rest you up for next week. So I'm probably not too concerned with a Josh Dacos, but he might be the one where you do look elsewhere potentially. But sorry, you go.
No, I was just about to say, I think you're talking about those 6. There are so many defender options on the periphery of those 6 that I can realistically see easily being a top 3 finisher this round. And so you've got a couple of options there in Houston. Sicily, I'm really hot on this week. Stewart as well.
So am I.
Tom Stewart as sort of an intercepting defender playing on a narrow ground. Like the ball is going to be funneled through this corridor. And he's playing West Coast as well. Even a player like Josh Worrell, like, Rory Laird's back, but he's shown that his consistency is at least a floor of 110 and that he can push high. We at the Blues just like bombing the ball in on our key forwards' heads and not being able to kick straight. So there are so many good options, and it's like a blessing and a curse at the same time that we have all 9 games going, because there's just so many options you can choose from. You really can't go wrong.
Exactly right. And well, you would think
hopefully,
so. Let's hope that's the case. Yeah. But it's funny, you touched on James Sicily. He's one I've actually tried to lock away into a few of my squads this week as well, just because they come up against the Bulldogs. So I think we might even start there, just talking through a few of these options here on screen. I like that. In terms of those Bulldogs, they are giving up the most points. And last week against the Bombers, the Bulldogs, they're giving up the most points there. Archie Roberts, 166 last week, which was your play there that got you over the line in the 22s, and he was our pod last week. Jacob Farrow had 116, and Zach Reed had 115. I think there's an element there that those boys did chip it around a fair bit, and it probably reflected their inability to move the footy through that Dogs defence as much as it reflects the Bulldogs' ability to give up points to defenders. So I think with Sicily, I'm chasing it because I know that he's got a ceiling. He hit 143 2 rounds ago as well. That was against the Bombers, who are another positive matchup for defenders. So coming up against the best matchup for defenders, I'm pretty keen to chase that as a bit of a ceiling score to round out my back line there. And they've been his best matchup across his career to date. He missed their game last season, but in 2024, he had scores of 139 and 117 GDS points. So he's one that, in terms of those boxes I look at each week, he's ticking each of those. And I also like catching a player when they're off a bit of a down week. He was actually our avoid last week. We said probably don't go chasing James Sicily. Although he's had a good start to the year, the Cats weren't a great matchup for him, and he hasn't shown any, scoring ability against them. So I really like catching him coming off a week like that too, because I think it catches coaches out a little bit. So have you got any other thoughts around a James Sicily why you were keen?
Oh, mate, I think, so what you're saying with regards to the Dons not being able to move the ball, I reckon it was about 3 weeks ago, First Crack, one of my favourite shows on Fox Footy throughout the week, really highlighted the fact that the Dogs don't really allow much ball to go in. Well, they allow so much ball in their defensive, like in the opposition's defensive 50, because they clog up the corridor and they clog up the exits into the forward 50. So the ball actually just gets pinged like end to end in one of the defensive arcs. And that's why when you go back in Pitty, really Adelaide had 2 tons in from the defenders, in Josh Worrell 115, Jordan Butts 104, but we also saw Nick Murray as a 98. And then against the Giants, Ash had the 165, Whitfield 109, Laverde 107, Fonte 103, Iden 100. And then against the Lions in the first round, Zorko the 169, Leicester 111, Wilmot 100. If 3 of the 4 matchups so far have resulted in one of the defenders scoring a 160, and if Carl Amon is out, I think I'm going there as well. Like he's such a good pick. And Ganners, I was going to touch on this man who, Pitty, I reckon is another player that, given we've been hurt by Jordan Clark just last week. Collingwood are the second easiest matchup for defenders. And when we look at sort of the scores that they've given up, it's basically the same as the Dogs. Like they give up max points. If I just bring it up here and just filter by defenders, they're giving up so many points to those defenders with Zorko. There was 5 defenders for your boys last week that scored 100 or above. And it's been 2+ in the previous weeks before that.
Yeah, has listed them here as well, because he did up some notes and he said to me, he was like, I'm going to put Jordan Clark in. I said, no, don't put him in. Like, I can't look at him on screen after last week because I'm off him. Here's my thing about Jordan Clark. So I think he is actually a good pick this week. He's a better pick this week than he probably was last
100%.
week. But so the Lions went one. So they had Zorko, Coleman, Fletcher. They had 141, 128, and 114 respectively, with Leicester and Wilmot also both going over 100. So they do allow a heap of points. And in terms of Jordan Clark, yes, he does move that footy, and I've called him that key distributor out of the back line, but I don't know if that's actually entirely true.
Not sold.
Like,
Not sold.
looking at that last week, when you pick him as a fantasy player, like you pick your fantasy players, right, as a fantasy coach, and you watch them so closely.
Got the goggles.
And I went, what are you doing? Like, push out for that cheap ball. Like, he's happy to let Luke Ryan take those kick-ins. Judd McVie seems to have a fair bit of market share on points back there too. Like, they're happy to use him going out. They're not looking for Jordan Clark as much as other teams are looking at some of these other defenders we're talking about, like a Jaden Short, for example. He is there on the option. Like, they've got Sam Banks as well, who had some more of that footy, but it's clear they look to use a Jaden Short, and the Lions look to use Zorko. It's not like that with a Jordan Clark, and that's why I don't like him. Yeah, but you can't argue with the data as well. I think the hard part, if you're looking at a Jordan Clark pod, who are you leaving out? I think that's my question.
And on that same point, it almost comes to the fact is we saw them with Western Bulldogs. It's clearly a matter of they're coming up into matchups that like to chip the ball around as well. You got Freo that like to move the ball as the bird flies, sort of thing. So whether or not Collingwood is a good matchup, it may just not be conducive to this type of game that Fremantle want to play to try to maximize those GDS points. And we've got so many options, as you say, Pitty, that personally I think Clark's a sort of a ladder lower, a bit lower than Sicily in terms of their respective matchups, knowing what each of them can respectively do.
Yeah, and I think the ceiling is the other thing for me. I'm still not sure Clark has the ceiling there, even in such a positive matchup like this one. I was also concerned with his ability to fade in and out of games. Like, he had a really good first half, and he didn't have a really good first half. He had a good first half, and he was tracking well at halftime, and then just fell off a cliff and, didn't score much in that second half. And it happened the week before too. He had 70-something, I think, in the first half, and then slowed down and just ticked over 100. So that's the other thing I don't like, whereas I think Sicily is a bit more hungry when it comes to accessing the footy and accessing those GDS points we like. But the one I'm really interested in here is a Dan Houston. He's won last week that I actually think, I don't know if this is going to be, he should have done more than what he did last week. I know Arnie Booger mentioned in the chat that they said they went away from Houston last week after Haz and I said we weren't keen on him up against the Gabba. But I actually think a lot of that was probably due to Nick Dacos being out. Josh Dacos spent a bit more time in the middle. Even at the end too, he spent a lot of time off the ground, and that's where he got a few of those points. So I almost think he probably should have done more than that 126. But they are looking to use him. So what are your thoughts on a Dan Houston this week?
Yeah, again, it probably comes back to the fact is I think I have more trust in the other options. Not to say that Houston's a bad pick, but I can't see myself with Fremantle being the third hardest matchup opposition defenders to score against, picking two Collingwood defenders. And if I was probably to pick one with safety, it'd probably be Josh Dacos. And then it probably is Houston's more for that poddish play. But not to say that is a bad pick, probably that there are that there's better options, I think, across the board. Even on the next line down, I know we're probably going to get there, but a Christian Salem against Essendon, as you're mentioning, that yes, Essendon probably not the easiest matchup for defenders, but there's no one really to take the ball away from Salem in defense there. Yes, you've got Xavier Lindsay who takes a bit of kicks, and Essendon may actually be a better matchup for inside midfielders than those designated kicker types. But Melbourne should comprehensively win this game, and I think Salem should score quite well to have a safe enough floor to be able to pick him with some level of security.
Yeah, exactly right. And in terms of their points too, they gave up some points last week. Obviously, we looked at Connor Buderick, for example. In the forward line, he had, 102 points last week. And if you go back the week prior against the Kangaroos, they gave up 157 points to Luke Parker and 139 to Colby. So they do give up points to those key ball users. And if we look back at that historical data too, Salem, he put up 106 points in their matchup last season, and only sort of 70 points the year before that. But we know there's been a bit of change in that back line. We know Salem is the number one player when it comes to using that ball out of the back line. So I agree. I think if you like a Christian Salem or you have a Christian Salem card you're keen to use in a competition, I think you can absolutely. Again, probably just not one I'm chasing at the moment in our competitions. Would you be tempted by a Kane Farrell though?
He's an interesting one, isn't he? Because I know one of the legends
Yeah,
of
yeah,
our channel, personally, John T, he messaged me saying, what were my thoughts on Kane Farrell last week? And he was saying he's the key distributor for Port Adelaide, and he was looking so good at just before halftime. And then I think he had a bit of an injury, niggle or something, which happened. And he slowed right off in the second half just to finish perhaps just on the ton or something like that.
yeah,
Against St
yeah,
Kilda, it should be an easy matchup. We know what Ross Lyon coach defenses, forward lines can give up bulk points to defenders. So Farrell could be a worthy pick. Again, it is very pottish. I probably prefer to go this way in sort of Sundays. I just think that there's
yeah.
probably players that I trust a bit more than Farrell. But these are the types, isn't it, Pitty, where if you put together a backline of Houston, Farrell, and somehow miss, you assume that one of the six are probably not going to score 120, let's say, off the plug and plays. If you can somehow make up a bit of points there, that could be all it takes to win a standard competition.
Yep, that's it. And remember, we got 3 standing comps we're playing in too. So if you've got a couple that you're like, oh, I'm not really worrying about the seasonal, I might just want to go at the weeklies. Like these are some of the players I think you can be picking absolutely for exactly that reason you said, sort of catching maybe one that doesn't quite score as well, and you get the guy that goes 130 plus. Got an interesting comment here as well from TCB. G'day, TCB. Thanks again for tuning in, mate. Caleb Daniel Pig. He keeps getting it done, but I just had a look there. If you want to know his last 2 scores against the Lions, 69 and 64. So, but the Lions are giving up some points this year to the opposition defenders, which actually surprised me. So they're the 7th easiest matchup for those opposition defenders. So that might be tempting a few people into looking at a Caleb Daniel, given his consistency. But just those last 2 scores, 69, 64, it just scares me. There's a few things I like to see from a player before I pick them each week. And one thing is that what have they done against this opposition team in the past? And yeah, when you see a couple 60 scores, it doesn't quite get me excited.
Colby McKercher, is there any sort of, where do you sit on him as a pick? Really good first half, moved out of the role. You don't trust him?
I trust him. I think he's a fantastic fantasy player, just not in standard comps for me this week. It really scared me what happened in that second half, and the fact that he actually did really well defensively. And from a team perspective, they won the game because of a couple of his defensive acts. And I just am a little bit concerned by that. Because what we want that first half. We want him moving the footy sideways. We want him moving the footy backwards. We want him to get off his opponent and find some space and get that cheap kick. We don't want him being accountable for a Jagger Smith at a stoppage. That's the only little thing this week after seeing that. I go, okay, I might not play him in a standard comp until I see what next week looks like, and just make sure that role is what it is and he racks up the footy like we expect. I think he's still playing your 22s, of course. But yeah, that was a little flag I saw in that second half.
Nice.
Now, mate, one to avoid there on screen, a Bodie Hewland. We had a question last week about potentially playing a Bodie Hewland or even a
John Noble.
I'm blanking on other Gold Coast defender. Yeah, John Noble we were keen on. I'm blanking on the other one, the third one. Joel Jeffrey. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, Joel Jeffrey. So we had a question last week about those 3 and like who you're going to go towards. We leant towards the Johnny Noble, just given the consistency in his fantasy scoring. And then Hans did a bit of digging into the data. And in terms of a player to avoid, we think maybe it is a Bodie Hewland, although he has had a great start to the year. One thing I sort of mentioned was, again, he hasn't been a proven consistent fantasy scorer for us. And if you go back to his last 2 years of fantasy scoring, he's often put together a couple good games in a row and then he'll just fall off a cliff or have a poor game or 2 and go back to his normal scoring, and then he'll have a good game again down the track at some point. So for us, he's just a bit of an avoid at the moment, although coaches were looking at that last week, and you'll see that his average is currently at 108 GDS points for the season, but it's heavily inflated by that 156 against the Tigers in round 3 where he had 16 marks. So I think if you're looking at that don't chase it because it's coming into the second hardest matchup for him across his career so far. His last 2 games against the Swans have been a 64 and an 18 in 2024. So he will be required to shut down one of those key forwards for the Swans. We've got Charlie Curnow and we've got Joel Amadi as well, really proving to be a bit of a handful down there. So I think he's one for us where sort of encouraging coaches maybe don't go chasing that this week, particularly with so many options going around we've talked about.
Yeah, I think that's a short and sweet. Pretty easy there.
Absolutely. Now, any other players you've got in your mind that we haven't already spoken about before? We've mentioned a few with McKercher and Short. Tommy Stewart we've only touched on briefly, but he's, again, a very solid option, again, like you said, on that narrow ground. And probably the Eagles' inability to move the footy as effectively inside 50 and given the experience of Geelong, I think, that's going to be a really, hopefully a really fruitful matchup for him. And they allowed like 127 points to O'Reilly Bice, for example, and they allowed 131 and 113 points to Farrell and Burgoyne in round 3. So, I think if you want to go there, I think he's another great pick as well.
Yeah, we need the utility, I reckon. I'd happily pick 8 defenders this week. There are so many good options that have good matchups. It is pretty good. And as I mentioned before, Josh Worrell as well. He with Laird in it just brings him down a tad bit, and he might take him from 8th in the pecking order to like 11th, just because of how tight sort of the defender rankings are this week. But so many good options, and let's just hope that you can't really go wrong with many of them, if any of them at all. There is just a couple of things to flag, though, in terms of with 5 of the games at Adelaide Oval, there are 2 games at Norwood Oval, which is a very skinny ground. There's no real wings per se. So the 2 games at Norwood Oval, Geelong and West Coast, Sydney and Gold Coast, they're probably going to be quite congested and heavy and not so conducive for those outside type plays. That's just something to flag. I don't know what that necessarily means with someone like a Tom Stewart that is a bit of both. He's like the intercepting type, but is also used in transition. So just something to bear in mind there, I would say.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Thanks very much for bringing that up too, mate. And as you can see on screen there, before we move on, Primetime Pod, Ollie Hollands getting it done sneakily. A Sunday superstar as well. We've got the Giants playing on Sunday, so you can look at Lockie Ash, for example, as our Sunday superstar. How good will he be? And a Jacob Farrow as well too, sneaky for the Bombers there. Coming up against another, good matchup for defenders in the Demons. After a great week last week against the Dogs. So he's looked really good in terms of that draft pick there, from the Bombers. Now, mate, moving on to our midfield as well. Our midfielders, some more interesting players. Jeez, it's so good having some of these players back in our sides. I can tell you that. Like, look at that there on screen. We have our plug and plays are Nick Dacos, Marcus Bontempelli, Bailey Smith, Max Holmes, Jordan Dawson. They're just doing what we expect, and they're doing it so well. You can look at a Bont potentially as well against a Hawthorn. You might not like that matchup so much, but I think he's just, he's such a good player. He does. He's reliable. I think these guys, you probably, if you've got them, you're probably playing them, and you might just be thinking, okay, well, how much salary do I want to put on them? That's probably the question there. But in terms of those other 3 options, we've picked out Finn Callahan, Caleb Strong, and Jack Steele. Have you been considering any of those in your squads this week?
Very, very high on Jack Steele this week. I think Essendon is far and away the easiest matchup for opposition midfielders this year. When we have a look at sort of their matchup trend, they're on average to midfielders 13 points. By 13 points to second easiest, which is West Coast in terms of some of the scores. And this is where last week my late pivot from Ed Richards was Matt Kennedy, just because you're going up against Essendon. He's going to score well regardless. And what did you know he did? And the 2 players that stepped up, both under 22 players, in Joel Fraser and Riley Sanders, did the exact same. Like, it's pretty predictable in that regard when we're looking at just the midfielders. They've given up 3 tons, 3 tons at least in each of their games to the opposition's midfielders. And I think Jack Steele's going to carry through with that. It makes you think, are there any other Melbourne midfielders that you can think about? I guess with 22s, Caleb Windsor, Harvey Langford types might get a bit of a bump. But,
Well, obviously, Cozzy Pickett, you would hope as
Cozzy
well.
Pickett, exactly,
Who's
as a forward.
Playing through the midfield, you would sort of hope that this is not a game where he will fade out. Because I remember last year, and I know this is not talking about the forwards here, but he's got that midfield role. The knock on Cozzy I had was he had a dirty floor. And it was often in these matchups where he would just phase out. Like he would just sort of fall out of the game. And I heard some commentary over the weekend. Melbourne's directive this year is when they see Cozzy with his head down, they get into him. And they go, oi, yeah, come on, get yourself up and about. And he's just got a different demeanour now. So, yeah, he's another one I really like too. But for Jack Steele, he's had 141, 156 and 125 to start the year. And it's just so good seeing Jack Steele do what we know Jack Steele can do as an elite fantasy product for us. And in terms, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of, you know, those past scores against the Bombers to start this year. But in terms of Jack Steele and his previous scoring, he's hit scores in his last three against the Bombers of 119, 136 and 135. So you think of, again, all these things we want to see when we're picking a player and just have some confidence in locking him away. I think Jack Steele just walks up as straight into your side sort of pick this week.
Yep, like it, mate. Finn Callahan against the Tigers is another one that's very high on the radar. The bit of a knock on Finn, though, is doesn't really take many marks. Like he's second in the league for handball receives with 17.3 per game in the 4 games they played, but he's not. There's nothing better in GDS, I reckon, than a player that can just get in that 1-2, get the +7 for the mark and the kick. And Callahan just isn't really getting the marks at the moment. Against the Tigers, though, that could change. And if he can get a bit more kicks and a bit more marks to really bump up the scoring, this could be the week to do so. Are you looking at playing him in any of your comps?
I am, yeah. I'll have him somewhere. Initially, he was in early in the week in my classic side, for example, but it's just one that I'm probably playing him elsewhere. And it's just because I've probably got a bit more confidence in the others. Like, the thing I like about Finn Callahan is obviously the Tigers are giving up, a bulk amount of points, 96.8 GDS points on average to those opposition mids, and they're the second best matchup to target. We've seen some players put up some really good scores as well, including Caleb Sarong, who had that huge 152 against them in round 3. So he's definitely one you can be looking at. And I think, for example, I think it's my challenger side. I'll be having a Finn Callahan in there. I don't know what it is about Finn Callahan. Maybe it is how he sort of builds his score as well that I don't like. But he should be a great pick, and he had a great game as well against the Magpies. I think from memory it was 132 GDS points and 35 touches. So if he's got that sort of form coming in against the Tigers, he should be a really good pick.
I like him.
Probably a question of how do you fit them all in as well, like a Caleb Sarong too. Now we've talked about Docker roulette, right? Like which Docker are you going to go to? He smashed that out of the park. He said, "I'm the main man. If I'm not going to get cop a tag, of course, I'm the main man." And has he tempted you into picking him this week, coming up against the Magpies?
I think my rule with Caleb Sarong is not so much the roulette. It's more so, is he going to get tagged?
Yeah.
If he doesn't get tagged, his ceiling is up there with some of the best in midfielders. But the problem is
the best.
Yeah. And I guess it's quite, it might sometimes be just looking at it and seeing, is there a possible tag that could come his way? Playing against Collingwood, I don't really think that they have employed a tagger this year. They did use one against Naz, but that was Perriman running with him all around the ground, and it wasn't really your stock standard tag. So I think Sarong's a safe play this week, especially in prime time. But even as a standard player, sort of your M7 could definitely see that working out as well.
That's exactly where I've got him this week, and he's actually one that I bumped Finn Callahan out for. That's exactly the conclusion we've come to as well this week in terms of if he's not going to cop that hard tag, we're sort of sick of talking about it, then you can probably play him as well in that matchup. He's just proven to be one of the best midfielders in the comp. And if you know he's not going to cop that tag, then just go for it. And as you said, I think you've hit the nail on the head with Perriman as well and what his role is. I think we were concerned about a Finn Callahan in that round 3 matchup. We thought, is there the likelihood that Perriman runs with him? And he didn't, and he put up 132 points. So, I think you're right in the fact he won't cop that. And maybe it's one of those ones you go, if he does, he does. And if he doesn't, there's every chance we got a ceiling score there on the other side, which is a really nice reward. But the Pies are, they're a bit of a neutral matchup as well in terms of the data. However, last week was interesting. We saw Will Ashcroft hit 156, Neil 134, Bailey 133, Levi Ashcroft 105. Obviously, the flag there is they'll look a bit different this week with Nick Dacos likely to come back in. But even still, like we've seen Caleb Sarong put up good scores. In the last game they played, he hit 147, and didn't cop any attention. So I think he's a good pick again this week for sure.
Love it.
Talk me through Sammy Walsh, mate. As a bit of a pod, we flagged him as a little pod this week.
Yeah. Well,
what are you tempted to go there?
Yeah, good news if you were looking to play Sam Walsh. George Hewitt has been dropped, which our best and fairest from last year. Big news, sort of like in terms of a real reality check amongst the senior core players. Sam Walsh, there should be more midfield, well, not midfield opportunities, more so centre bounce opportunities or centre ball up opportunities now. He looks to be playing fine. Now I did flag last week on the sword play GDS potty that he's probably going to cop some Finn O'Sullivan attention, and it limits the opportunities available. And we saw with Sackmer the week before that when you are going to cop a tag, you really can't get out into open space and get the mark and get that kick sort of thing. You're really relying on handball receives or getting in and dirty, and it doesn't really benefit sort of GDS scoring where you work so hard to get the ball from under the pack and you handball it out for +2. You want the players to spread. And this could be an opportunity to spread, especially if the scoreline is to go as most expect with Adelaide comprehensively winning. Walsh still will try his hard, and I think he could be quite a good selection again in that sort of M6, M7 range. I think with the plug-in plays this week, I really don't want to mess around with them too much because they've got the high ceilings on any given day, and they've got quite good matchups. Maybe not for Bond, but the other four have really good matchups.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of good matchup, that's probably the other thing for Sam Walsh we like this week. He was our avoid the past 2 weeks. Exactly the same thing you raised there on your pod, mate. We had the same concerns for. And my other concern for Sam Walsh is that, like you said, he's been working so hard and it just doesn't get reflected in his fantasy scoring. The other thing I like, actually there's two other things that I like here about the Blues this week against the Crows, or Sam Walsh against the Crows. The first is that they're the third easiest matchup for opposition mids. They're actually giving up about 96 GDS points on average, which is surprising. First of all, we saw Brayshaw and Sarong, they hit 120 and 145 points respectively last week. So the points are there. We had Baz and Holmes go 178 and 135 the week before that. There are points available. We've also seen Nick Newman come back in to the back line, which I think you add an extra ball user in there who is actually good. Like there's a few players in there that I go, man, I would not want you kicking the footy. Like, so
Lewis
add
Young.
an extra. There's a few unfortunately, and it's a rough time for the supporters yourself, mate, for the Blues. But I think a Nick Newman in there really does help, and it might be a bit of a superficial thing, but I know some other pods have talked about. Maybe it does sort of give that incentive for a Sam Walsh to push out into that space or push that to that spot to receive that 45 kick or trust Nick Newman to get the footy to him. So maybe there's an element of that, but I just like the fact there's a nice ball user there and there's been points available in previous matchups and he's clearly their best midfielder. So I think he's definitely a point of difference you could be considering this week, especially if you've got a high rarity card you are keen to rip out somewhere. And obviously they're in our... No, they're not in our prime time, are they?
They are. Well,
they
it's
are.
tomorrow.
They are in our prime time.
Yeah.
That's right. So someone to look at too for your prime time competition. And Isaac Heaney, you flagged this last week, mate, on your pod. We didn't mention it. We really should have because he was coming back off that bye and we probably overlooked him from that point of view. I played him in Challenger, which was really nice. I had his diamond there, so that was sort of a good reason why I ended up coming sixth over there. He was just a really good matchup for the Eagles in terms of posing something they probably couldn't shut down through the midfield and pushing forward, and probably shapes as another potential pod play this week. Would you have similar feelings rolling out a Heaney again or coaches looking at an Isaac Heaney?
I think the Swans Gold Coast matchup, we talked about on the sword play GDS potty this week. If there's one game that I would avoid, that I would personally avoid picking players from, it's probably this game. Just because it's going to be two really strong teams. it's one of those games where you really can't. I've really liked to be able to sort of predict what the game line will almost look like, what the flow of the game will look like, who's going to get up an early lead, that sort of thing. But I'm clueless in this game. Like the Swans and the Suns have such contrasting game styles, and it's going to be such a good watch that I'm almost happy to avoid all players from this game, apart from maybe like a Brodie Grundy on the narrow ground, which we'll talk about coming up. But yeah, it's so difficult, isn't it? Where there's so many other good options that you're playing Heaney as a POD, probably not in a great matchup, but still, you know what he can deliver on a given day. The inconsistency in scoring is the tricky part with the Heaney type, though.
Yeah, and again, picking him off a week where he's gone 150 just feels a little bit like you're chasing points. If you go back and have a look at his last two against the Suns, though, he's hit scores of 83 and 136, which probably does sort of highlight to you that inconsistency there for him. If you are chasing a ceiling, though, he could be your guy as well, particularly if you've got one of those cards there to play off him just because of how good he is as well. And outside of that injury, he has been in good form to start this season. But if you want to roll into our avoid, mate, Noah Anderson is our avoid. We think he will likely cop that James Jordan tag. Really hasn't quite gotten to the sort of heights we thought he might have this week. And he was one we thought matchup data last week against who they play last week. They played
against Melbourne
Tigers. Oh, Melbourne. That's right, Melbourne Tigers before the bye, and then into Melbourne, and just didn't do what we thought he might. We thought there would be some attention from Tolstrup as well, and just really struggled. So he's one rolling into this matchup where James Jordan is one of the best taggers in the comp. We think that's one that we're pretty happy to avoid there. They're also the fifth hardest matchup, the Swans, in terms of oppositional matchup data. So we're pretty happy not to be playing a Nando this week.
Yeah, there's so many things with him on our party. We call him the Noah Coaster because you just never know what you're going to get from him. When we think about Anderson, he wasn't even tagged last week. Tuke Miller got the Tholstrup tag, and he still couldn't put out a big score, really. I guess it's a lot of finger pointing at the moment in terms of him as a captain. Not finger pointing in a bad way, more so you go here, you go there, as opposed to demanding the ball. And in GDS, there's not enough sort of time to say, I don't need a captain in my GDS squad. I want you to go and get the ball and kick the ball. Like it doesn't. We don't worry about the intangibles over here when we're setting our squad. So I think until we see sort of that hunger come back, I think even without the tag and the matchup is the other part, Sydney Gold Coast again, is probably one where you're looking to avoid at this stage.
Yeah, that's it. And has a sign-off note there, Fernando as well, is exactly what you just summarised. So even if the tag doesn't eventuate, he said he hasn't shown the ability to put up a ceiling score this season, despite the run of positive matchups, and avoid that. So I think we're in consensus there. And speak of the man as well, he's in the chat.
I was going to say, it's good to hear that I'm Haz's mouthpiece at the moment.
Yeah, you're hitting all the points that he's done his research on. So Haz is in the chat there as well. G'day, mate, on his way home from training as well. So good to see you, mate. Thanks for tuning in. And thanks for all your hard work as well, putting this together as always.
Cheers,
in terms of our primetime pod, Sunday Superstar and under 22 player to watch as well. Ollie Florent there as a bit of a pod. It's just been, hasn't put up a poor score just yet. Hasn't put up a ceiling score either. But in terms of that little pod play there in prime time, if you've got a high rarity card, you could have a look at that. Sunday Superstar, very hard to go past a Bailey Smith, although there are some very good options on that Sunday fixture. And obviously Harley Reid is our player to watch. He got tagged into the ground last week against the Swans, and we'll be looking to bounce back this week for sure. I have no doubt about that.
Tricky matchup though. Ooh.
Yeah, I think they're all tricky sometimes so for Harley. We'll see what he can do. Now, mate, our rucks. This is the interesting one here. Our rucks. Where are we going this week with our rucks? We think the big thing to point out for coaches as well, Tristan Sherry's still got another 2 games he's out for, and Tim English, he'll be out for a number of weeks with that MCL strain, which is, a real shame, and it just limits our options there in the ruck. And there's really, outside of those 3 at the top there, those 3 options for round 5, there's not a whole lot else presenting as an option. So in terms of those 3, which are the 2 you're thinking of rolling out this week?
Well, I think regardless of the voodoo that Lockie Blackiston is putting out into the universe, you just have to play Max Gawn, don't you? And I think he's shown time and time again that regardless of the opposition, regardless of the matchup, he'll just deliver. And we always think he's going to fall off a cliff, but what is it? 130 in every game so far this season? Something along those lines, isn't it? Like he's just had a ridiculous start to the season, and I just don't see a reason why it's going to stop for him. Do you see any reason for Max Gawn for coach to be hesitant? Or 120, sorry, 121, 145, 151, 139 this year.
No, absolutely no reason whatsoever. I think very hard to go against him. And he was coming into his hardest matchup across the course of his career, like that Gold Coast one against Witsy. If ever you were going to say it's a no for Max Gawn, it was last week, and he puts up a 139.
We'll put our hands up and say we said to avoid him because all the matchup data and everything goes to suggest that even for a man like Max, he has a kryptonite, and that's Jared Witts. But he's just gone and said, nah, I don't have a kryptonite, mate. Like, that's it.
It was I know, and the reason why we ended up playing him as well, as I said, it's just funny how different people see different things too. The thing we saw with Grundy was we were scared of, we've been burnt before chasing that matchup, and so that's why we're like, we'll go with Gawn. Because the other thing that was interesting with the Jared Witts is he gave up 99 GDS points to Nank till 3/4 time. And we thought if Nank can do that in 3 quarters, surely Gawn is going to have him covered. And we know there's been a few changes this year with the rules and that ruck landscape. And we sort of thought Gawny could be a bit of a play here, like even given that tough matchup. So we'll get to Grundy in a second because he's got that Gold Coast matchup this week, which is something to consider there. Like maybe it's not as doom and gloom as we thought in terms of that tough Gold Coast matchup. But yeah, 139, that's elite coming up against Blackiston. I didn't get to watch that game closely in terms of that, but did Blackiston actually end up going back towards the end of that game when Tim English went out of the ruck? I've heard some talk he actually went back.
I watched the whole game and I did not notice him going back because they had the defense was kicking the ball around for the most part because it was very low sort of stoppage game. And I think perhaps with Essendon, that's one of the concerns you can sometimes have is that they really just don't have much stoppages happening. When Jordan Croft went into the rack, Lockie Blackiston was racking up against him. So I don't think there was any sort of changes personnel-wise there. It was probably just that there weren't as many stoppages as per normal. I guess one thing just to add on to that with regards to Max is he doesn't really need the stoppages to score. Like he gets down the line, he kicks the ball a lot. Nate Dad is saying when Zach Reid went off. I don't know when Zach Reid went off. So thanks for pointing that one out. And then he said Peter Wright came into that. There we go. But Zach Reid has no issues this week and should play, if I'm not mistaken. So that should
I just wonder how far. I wonder how far Nick Bryan is off coming in as well for them potentially.
Bit of conditioning in the VFL at the moment.
So that he'll be in, I'm sure, in a matter of time. But I think even with Blackiston, like it's been Cherry the week before, it's been it was English last week. I think I'm pretty confident with Max this week coming up. The thing with that too, and I know someone pointed this out in the Discord as well, that they are the hardest matchup for opposition rucks this year. They haven't been great. They've only been giving up 64.5 GDS points. But the thing I want to flag too, just keep in mind, sometimes like there's a story behind the data. So Meek and Reeves, they're the dual ruck setup, and so you can't look at Meek and Reeves in that round and go, okay, that's what a Gawn's going to dish up, or a Jordan Sweet hit an 80, for example. Jordan Sweet is Jordan Sweet. He's not in the tier of rucks that we've got here on screen. Tristan Cherry, from my understanding too, he was tracking well at halftime, and then he had that brain fade of an absolute century and just went downhill from there. So you could almost put that as an anomaly. And obviously Tim English, 57, and got injured in that too. So I just think there's a lot of, we haven't seen a full game from like a top tier ruck against them, and I'm pretty happy just to back Maxi Gawn in. I'm not going to go against him. I don't see there's a reason to at all.
And just to add to what you just mentioned, Pitty, if we have a look at the five rucks that this data is based off of, only one of them has had more than 60% time on ground, and that's Tristan Cherry in the brain fade game. So I don't think you can really take too much out of it. It's not to say that Lockie Blackiston's an easy matchup, but I wouldn't put him up there in terms of the theoretically harder matchups for someone like a Max Gawn.
Yeah, correct. And
the Jared Witts point is very interesting, though. I want you to sort of tell us why you
Yeah.
might think this is the case, Pitty.
Well, it was just off what probably Hazard mentioned last week when we were looking at it in a bit of detail, just that 99 points for Nank to 3/4. I just thought that doesn't happen for Witsy. Like, why is that the case? And then yeah, I just think maybe it's those rules potentially. He just hasn't quite looked as restrictive as what he normally does. We know he's really tough to ruck one-on-one against. So I think there's just a bit in that potentially. And if Gawn goes 139, we've got Brodie Grundy coming off a 155, and we know he at his best is one of the best rucks in the comp. So I think, especially on a week like this, we should be picking him. But yeah, I just think Witsy, maybe he's not as, I don't want to say that actually because I'll know exactly what will happen this weekend. But he hasn't appeared to be as restrictive as we know Jared Witts too. Yeah, so I think even though Grundy probably hasn't scored well on them previously, he had 59 in round 7 last year. But the other thing you got to keep in mind too is that he has scored well on the past. The time before that, he scored 153. And if you actually go back through his historical scoring against the Suns, he's always had these huge pop scores of 140, 150 against them. And then every now and then there's a really poor score. So, yeah, I think that this one, obviously, we're going to be picking him given the week, or I think we probably should. The only other option there maybe is a Luke Jackson. But yeah, with Witsy there potentially giving up a bit more points this year than what he normally has, I think he should be a good pick again this year, or this week, sorry.
I like it, mate. Nah, sounds good. I'm very interested to hear how you managed to put Sunday superstar Matt Flynn into the same box, though.
Oh, Matty Flynn. Well, he's got a great matchup. So we've got to pick 2 rucks on that Sunday comp. And Matt Flynn comes up against I would not be picking him in a standard comp. But if I'm going, who are you looking for? It's probably a Matt Flynn for Sunday, I reckon. Again, it'd just be a silver. You're not playing more than that. And that was my first thing I sort of jot down. I said, I didn't think I would ever be speaking about Matt Flynn, but here we are. And I think given we've got no X and no English this week, like I thought I'd throw his name out there. I was actually looking to Blitzarves as the pod. He was the one I was looking at initially. But the thing is, he's not the main ruck anymore. Like, it's Mitch Edwards. Blitz has only attended 31% and 37% of ruck contests in those past 2 weeks with Edwards in the side. So I actually don't think we should be targeting him for that Eagles matchup. If you're looking at the ruck data. Geelong, on the other hand, are the 4th easiest matchup for opposition rucks. They're conceding in 96 GDS points to opposition rucks. Now, we're obviously not looking at the Hawthorn rucks scoring from the weekend, given they use that dual ruck setup. But Lockie McAndrew the week prior scored 104 GDS points, and LJ scored obviously 140 in that first round matchup. So there's points available. At last year, round 12, Matt Flynn had 110 points against him. Now, albeit that wasn't against Mitch Edwards, so that's the one little difference, because he'll be rucking against a 4th gamer this year, which maybe that's more beneficial and maybe it's less beneficial. I'm not quite sure about that one, but it is a spicy one. It's something to consider for that Sunday competition, but with his previous scoring against them being solid, 110 last year, 4th easiest matchup for rucks, I think in Sunday, I'm looking at a Matt Flynn.
There we go, mate. You heard it here first.
Let's see how it goes at the end of the weekend, hey? But do not have the guts to be doing that at all in a standard comp. That is for sure. That would end my season. What about an LJ though, as an option for our standard comps? I know coaches will have some of his cards getting around, and he's one of our all-stars from last year. Even though he's playing, sharing those ruck duties with a Sean Darcy, could you be looking at him this week?
Definitely. I think you could definitely be thinking about him. And the thing with LJ is, it sucks that he's in a ruck share because his floor is still quite solid. So he scored 140, 83, 88, 107 this year. I think personally, with the other two being the sole rucks in Gawn and Grundy, you're probably more likely to look at those two. But we can see what Jackson can do. And I don't think Darcy Moore's back in he's going to be fit for Friday either. Even if he's playing as a key forward, as a midfielder, as a ruck, especially if he's going up against someone like Darcy Cameron, when Sean Darcy's going up against Oscar Senior, it's a bit tricky to really sort of predict what's going to happen there. But if he's going up against Darcy Cameron, I think he should be quite suitable at ground level, actually, to do quite well there for Jackson post-clearance.
Yeah, exactly. They're the 5th hardest matchup. Actually, interesting. Collingwood, they're the 5th hardest matchup for opposition rucks. They only concede about 73.8 GDS points, and their midfield's pretty neutral in terms of 9th in terms of difficulty. So, like, it's not screaming like a matchup to target for LJ. But as you said, he should be a play. Like, he can play in probably most weeks given what he can do. And we had Lockie McAndrew as well scored. What was that? Oh, sorry, no, apologies. LJ scored 107 last week against the Crows, which actually did surprise me there a little bit. I didn't think he was going to be putting up a score like that. So coming off a pretty solid week, we know what he can do. He's probably an option you could look at if you weren't sold on a Gawn for that Lackiston factor, or if you weren't keen on the Grundy matchup against Jared Witts. He's someone you could play if you want. I've probably got them Gawn, Grundy 1 and 2, and then LJ could be a 3. That's just for me.
On Collingwood as sorry, Pitty, I was just going to say on Collingwood as rucks, similar to the narrative around Lockie Blackiston, like the rucks that Collingwood have played, Darcy Ford for 55, Kieran Briggs for 79, Lockie McAndrew for 78, and then the ruck combo of Tom DeConning 96 and Rowan Marshall 32. They haven't really played sort of a top tier ruckman or a ruck like a Luke Jackson type that you could really get something useful out of. So I guess that's a caveat to sort of not stray away anyone that's looking to play Luke Jackson simply because Collingwood is the 6th hardest matchup on paper. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good to go into that data as well and look at who they have played as well. Now, again, Lockie McAndrew, I've been surprised with him too. I think I've put him on there just as, who are the other rucks with some of those positive matchups to talk about. He's just surprised me as a player who's doing some really good things this year. He's got scores of 118 and 104 in his past too. And I think Riley O'Brien came in last week and I was a bit, I wasn't sure how that was going to affect him, but I think Riley O'Brien might go out this week potentially.
He's dropped.
He is dropped. I haven't seen teams. There you go. Yeah. He didn't really bring a lot and obviously had that really crucial turnover late. So, and had low time on ground anyway. So I'm not quite sure what he provided them last week, but it's good to see McAndrew still the main man there because I think he's actually been really good and he's surprised me.
Really
so,
good.
Yeah, I think he's a play in our primetime competition for sure this week.
For sure.
Would you agree Briggs is a fade if anyone's looking at that for the Richmond matchup?
Yeah, well, Richmond are probably going to have to play a rookie ruckman, I think, in Ollie Hayes-Brown this week with Samson Ryan getting the week suspended as well. So, look, I think, I don't even know, definitely for standard, like, I wouldn't be going there. But if you're comparing Kieran Briggs against a rookie ruckman and Matt Flynn against a 4th gamer, it's like, it is comparing apples and apples in a way, but they're like really rotten apples that you're comparing.
Yeah, 100%.
So I don't know. If he's going up against a rookie ruck, there is a part of me that says he could be a decent standard, a Sunday option, but definitely not as a standard option. He could score 20 just as likely as he could score 120.
Yeah, exactly. He's had scores of 76, 65, 75, and 79 to start this year.
I mean, that's consistent at least.
Yeah, so maybe there's a bit of meat on the bone there for a Kieran Briggs, but not something I'll be chasing, that's for sure. I just thought if anyone looked at that matchup and the idea that, they'll have that rookie ruck or potentially they go the Campbell Gray, I think it was, they rolled with a couple of weeks ago. Gray was doing a bit of that ruck there. So if that tempted anyone, I just think his form hasn't been there and I think the rules aren't positive for him. I think he's sort of struggling this year and, it's probably just not something to chase, but maybe a Sunday look potentially if you were interested. Now, mate, we'll move on there as well. Obviously, our under-22s, we've got Mitch Edwards that we can be looking at, and we've also got Cooped Duff Tyler as well. Yeah. So, yeah, Mitch Edwards has been actually pretty solid too. So coming up against the Eagles, he might be someone we're looking at. But one of those two you're probably playing in that competition. But yeah, Mitch Edwards probably caught my eye a bit last week. Yeah. Now, mate, into our forwards. Now, the place we're going to start here, our plug and plays, we've got Harry Sheasel, Brian Myers, Cozzy Pickett, Sam Flanders, and I've thrown Josh Rochelle in this week as well. He may not stay there for a long time. We'll see how long he lasts. But I think at the moment, given how popular he'll be amongst the coaches in terms of their selections, I think he's someone we can be plugging and playing relatively confidently. That midfield role is still there. But talk to me about Harry Sheasel. We had Causa in the Discord mention this before, and we thought we'd bring it up. Is this a play? Is someone like a Sheasel, or maybe there's somebody else in that list? Maybe it could be Flanders against Port. Is there someone in that list that you go, could we potentially fade them this week? Is there any benefit to that? And we'll use Sheasel as that example. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, theoretically, you could fade anyone you want, genuinely, and I guess that's the beauty of GDS. It's only a 1 week sort of commitment into doing that. Personally, I think those plug and plays, I'm pretty happy with most of them. On the Sheasel sort of fading discussion, I think the issue with fading Sheasel is, yeah, you are fading him for the potential that he could be tagged. Let's say that he is tagged by Jared Berry. I think that a tagged Harry Sheasel game is going to be as effective as just a standard, let's say, off those plays, a standard Sam Flanders game. Sam Flanders is a metronomic 105, 110 player. If Sheasel's tagged, he probably still gets to 105, 120 naturally. If we have a look at his career, he's played, I want to know how many games he's played, but since the start of 2024, there have only been 4 games, sorry. 4 games where Harry Sheasel has not scored 100 GDS points. And
that's crazy,
in his
isn't it?
term, I want to know how many games this is. I imagine this would be let's say it's a 50-game sample size. He's not scored 104 of those. And so it's a pretty ridiculous number. And in the 2 games in these 3 years, or 2 years, last year and the year before, that he's played against the Lions, he's got 142 and 123. It's one of those players where I don't think you really get it. And as TC Quadruple Beast says there, if a North player is going to get tagged, Luke Davies-Uniacke, you probably cops it first, just because Sheasel he's a bit too dynamic for the tag, I reckon. Like, you can't, he's not like Nick Dacos, where he's getting handball receives and just running up and down the ground, but he gets in and out of space really well. And that's where he's a really solid GDS option, because he just knows to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, he's a smart player for sure. Like, even last week, that wasn't a great game for him in terms of his scoring, but he still found a way to 95 GDS points for us, which, you go for your forward line. As I said, if it was in the midfield, maybe you could make more of a case for it, where there's some bigger ceilings. But, in the forward line, if you pick a player who goes 120, like, you're not getting all that much on top of a Harry Sheasel. The only thing you're getting is you're potentially going to fall behind in the seasonal rankings if he does do what he normally does, which is put up a great score. So, it's not one for me. But as you said, if you've got a gut feeling, you're like, I want to do it, like, go for it. You can. But just be aware that there are risks associated with that. That's for sure. And, I agree that shout about LDU as well. And the Lions maybe just backing their midfield in against a Harry Sheasel, for example. I think they're also looking better this year too. So I think the Lions won't be taking them lightly. That's for sure. Now, mate, the forward options there to round out our forward line. I feel like there's actually a lot of options we could be looking at this week, and there's a lot that I really like, and I'm really struggling to figure out which ones I want to play. I'm trying to split a number of them across competitions. From that list there, the 3 that we could be looking at: Jeremy Cameron, Toby Green, Connor McDonald. There's a couple good pods there on screen as well in Sean Manor and Josh Tracy. There's probably a couple others as well. I know I haven't got a Shea Bolton in there, for example, who some few coaches have been looking at this year. Is there anyone there that has taken your fancy when you're building your squads this week?
Yeah, well, I think Jeremy Cameron, 123 and 153 in his last 2 matchups against West Coast. In a tough matchup against Hawthorn, scored 111. I think for that matter that he's a fine selection. In the same vein, I know that my scar was Sean Manor, but he's just one of those players where in a good matchup, he's going to get the job done most times. And I guess it was probably a bit naive for me to think that he could do it against Hawthorn. But it's one of those players where now he's coming up into an easier matchup against West Coast. Narrow ground, should do quite well in this sort of setting. Connor McDonald is an interesting one, because you've got the 2 Hawks forwards then. I don't think I've actually played them correctly at all this year. And I really struggled to get a read as to when to play them. And if so, which one to play, because it's very difficult to be able to sneak both of them in Dylan Moore and Connor McDonald. I'm just a bit worried this week with the Western Bulldogs matchup that if the ball isn't going to be in transition, because the Dogs do that sort of they don't really press on the defensive options, but they do press on the forward line, whether there'll be a much easy ball for the Hawks half forwards to really, they might get suffocated a little bit. That's a bit of a worry for me. Otherwise, I think some of the other options that you've got here, Josh Tracy, without a functioning Collingwood backline, should do quite well there as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much to talk about here too. Like just on Connor McDonald there, I think if you're going to play him, I think it's this week. He's actually got some really good matchup data against the Western Bulldogs. It's been one of his best matchups across the course of his career. And in fact, it's his sixth best. He's had, in terms of his last two outings, he's had 98 GDS points and 119 GDS points. We know that obviously Will Day is out of the side this year. And I think that he's one who, you talk about them sort of putting pressure on the forwards there, he's one that gets up the ground. And he just has this ability to get involved in the play and mark the footy and move the footy by foot. So I think he's one that the only thing with me is if you're chasing a ceiling, it's not a Connor McDonald. We had Cam McKenzie out of the side last week and he put up his highest score of 124. Before that, it had been 103, 103, 93. So I think his ceiling's capped. I think if you're chasing a ceiling, it could be a Dylan Moore, for example. Yeah. I'm probably erring on the side of I like what I've seen from a Connor McDonald. If Cam McKenzie comes back into the side, I think, and so does Has, we're sort of not sure. We think that clips his ceiling a little bit, but he should be a pretty consistent play given his scoring history on the Dogs. They've also got Libba, Richards, Tim English out. So in terms of sort of seeing how that game's going to go, I think there's every case to say Hawks are going to be right in it. They could get the footy on their terms. They're playing at Adelaide Oval. So I actually don't mind a Connor McDonald this week against the Bulldogs, although he's been someone, you haven't sort of looked at before. So he'll be someone I roll out in some of my competitions. I'm just not quite sure where I'm going to play him. And I like the Sean Manor pick as well. As I said, I like players when they're coming off a bit of a down game and you can they get left out a little bit from coaches' decision-making just with that poor score. And I was actually so surprised last week with how lowly played he was. I thought he was going to be a lot more popular. Yeah, you wish.
I wish.
Yeah. Look, I genuinely was surprised. I had him in Contender, mate. So don't worry, I had him somewhere. But he's had some pretty good scores in the past, against the Eagles. They're a good matchup for him. Had 98 and 130 were his last. 98 and 130 in his last two against the Eagles. And we saw Papley and Jake Lloyd as well. They filled their boots last week in that demolition job against the Eagles. Papley had 2 goals for 138 GDS points and Jake Lloyd had 3 goals for 116 respectively. So I think this game will go a very similar way. I think Geelong does a number on West Coast. And I think I'd be shocked if Sean Manor doesn't get back to his usual form.
Yeah, right on, mate.
Yeah, and now Josh Tracy, who's going to play on him? I don't see someone going to him. He's the one I'm really keen on again. I had him a couple of weeks ago. I said to you about that Josh Tracy was my pod and he went 140 something. And last week I was like, not super keen on that one. He had 91, which was solid. I saw a lot of positive signs, but it just didn't scream a match up to target. And this week it screams like a match up to target. Last week against the Lions, we had Sam Draper, Oscar Allen, and Logan Morris really challenged them in the aerial contest. Sam Draper kicked 0 goals, but he had 81 GDS points, and he really challenged them when the ball was in the air. Oscar Allen had 3 goals for 81 GDS points, and Logan Morris had 3 goals for 117. So I think for someone like a Big Kahuna who's in the form he's in, he's had, 82, 134, 142, and 91 to start the year, and he's marking everything. I think the only tall defender they've got at the moment down there is like a Billy Frampton. I think this is one, that could be a really good pick.
I like it. It's a very inspired sort of selection there, but there's definitely reason for why he should do quite well. And so you just got to back your gut in, really. One that I'm very interested in similarly is Riley Thilthorpe. We know Jacob Weathering, no Harry Dean. We're going to be playing Wade Dirksen and Mitch McGovern, Lewis Young. I don't even know where Mitch McGovern's going to play, really. It's a really sticky tape together backline at the moment. And if someone's going to take control, Riley Thilthorpe could definitely do that this week and kick a big bag. I guess in that regard, Thilthorpe, Cameron, and Tracy, how would you sort of place them if you had to pick one or two of them?
I think it's Cameron 1. I think with Cameron, you want to be targeting that because he hasn't had the greatest start to the season. He had that amazing game in round 1 where he had 145 GDS points. Since then, he's had 72 and 99. They weren't ideal matchups, so he's coming back into a really good one. I think he's a bit thirsty. I think he wants to have a drink on the weekend, and he'll fill his boots against the Eagles. Like I can sort of see that happening. Like I feel like this is one he's kicked 5 goals and 9 goals the last 2 times he's played. Like you said, that's scores of 123 and 153 against the Eagles. So I've got him at 1 for that matchup. Now, mate, I'm biased. I'm going Tracy as the second. I think that he's the ceiling, and I think 3 is Thilthorpe, but he could easily be bumped up for consistency, and it probably depends what you're wanting. And it's a really good point you raise about the backline for Carlton sort of being sticky taped together at the moment. Carlton are actually still a really good matchup for forwards to target. So they currently, that's the 7th, I think that is there. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 7th best matchup you can be targeting. They're allowing 72.3 without a Jacob Wiedering, Harry Dean, like you said. Who's going to play on him? I was just pulling up there some of his data against the Blues in the past. What those GDS scores
last year, I think. Yeah, it was 50 for Thilthorpe last year, so nothing great. But Wiedering was playing that game as well, so
correct.
There's a big difference between having
Massive.
Jacob Wiedering in and without, basically. So
100%, and that's one now where I know I've got Toby Green there on screen, but I'd almost be keen to play a Riley Thilthorpe over a Toby Green, just knowing that's how the Carlton backline is going to be put together. And yeah, he's been consistent to start the year. So I really like a Riley Thilthorpe, mate, and I'll be trying to look at my squads at the end of tonight to see if I can squeeze him in because I just don't know how to put them all in. That's all. So it's a good comment that Causa raised in the Discord. Like, you know, I'm not saying we should be looking to fade them, but we've really got to consider each pick this week, particularly in our forward lines.
And TC Quadruple B's also said there's Zach Bailey, one of your boys. He's just a player. He gets the job done. And it's very similar to Harry Sheesley, isn't he? That he just knows where to go to get the ball, gets into the space, and they look for him, and your boys look for him as well.
Yeah, they do. And he's such a good ball user. He just gets involved in the play. Like we talk about those marks and kicks +7 every time. And then he's so smart around the goal face as well that can elevate his score if he can get a couple goals, which he typically does. So, yeah, he's one I really like. Just the only thing for me is the last 2 against North Melbourne haven't been great. He's had 75 and 87. And they have been a bit more of a challenge for teams this year. Like they've actually been stronger in the contest. So for me, this is one where he's a play. You can play him. But I think the ones we've talked about, there are some real upside. And that's one thing I've identified with the way I build my squads. I need to take a couple more risks. I feel I play it too safe at times, and I go for a player like a Connor McDonald who has given me what I need so far, or I'll just err on the side of caution a little bit. I need to take a couple more risks, so I'm probably going to be looking elsewhere this week, although I don't mind the shout.
Awesome.
And we'll quickly do this one before we move on there, mate. The one to avoid in a Sam Darcy there as well. He had 111 last week in what was a really good matchup for him, but he faces the Hawks this week. He hasn't had much success against them in comparison. In his last 2, he's had scores of 79 and 57. And we spoke about some of those key outs for the Dogs previously. So I think with those key outs too, that might impact how the game plays out. I'm finding it hard to find a reason to pick a Sam Darcy. And if you're going, I think you can only go so many key forwards. We've spoken about Cameron, Tracy, Thilthorpe, just as a few there, for example. So he's one I'm probably happy to sit out on this week.
Yeah, agree fully in that regard. There's just too many good options personally this week. And with Tom Barras there, it's going to be a tricky afternoon, I reckon, or tricky evening, I reckon, for Sam Darcy.
Yeah, they've got some good defenders down there, that's for sure. Now, mate, these are our contender sides for the week as well. So we've got a few there. We have, obviously, Has putting his side there. He had, finished third, as we mentioned at the start of the episode. So he killed it last week with a few of his pod selections. In our backline, you can see what we've put there. This is a competition where we do want a bit of a Dan Houston. So we're playing him here. Maybe not so much in another competition. We're trying to spread those last defenders around a little bit. So there'll be a Jaden Short that appears in ours as well. There's a few there, but as you can see, we're similar in the fact we've got those 2 Saints and we've got the 2 Giants defenders. And then obviously Sicily we're chasing across our competitions. Has will have a Josh Dacos as well across his other 2. So those defenders we've spoken about, mate, they're going to appear across our squads, and that's what our contender teams are looking like. The midfield, again, we're chasing a few of those plug and plays. We like our Jack Steele, Caleb Sarong. obviously a Jordan Dawson there too, just being really consistent. Gawn and Grundy, both happy to go there, mate. There'll be no Matt Flynn's or rolling around for us. And in the forward line there, you can see we've gone a couple different ways too, just depending on what squad we're talking about. So I've currently got a Sean Manor sitting there, but it's a Josh Tracy elsewhere, as well as a Connor McDonald too. But I think I'm going to rework a couple of things. I want to try and squeeze a Riley Thilthorpe in there too. I think he's going to be a great play this week, like you flagged already. What are your thoughts just looking at a couple of those teams, mate?
Yeah, I like it. I can clearly see you guys are very high on Dan Houston. I think has gone Houston ahead of Josh Dacos as well, which is very interesting there. Caleb Sarong for both you boys. Sorry, Pitty, what's that?
I was just going to say, has his flag. That's his pod team, so he throws his pods together. So he's Josh Dacos. He's his classic and his challenger. So again, beat the squad. He'll have a Josh Dacos there somewhere. You can work out what the salary is and who his other 22 are, but there is a Josh Dacos there, and me too. Like I think he's the one. I'm going a Josh Dacos over Dan Houston. I will be very clear about that. But in Contender, that's where we sort of have a few of these extra picks, and I want to have a Dan Houston somewhere, and Contender's just the place I'm going to do it. So yeah, Sicily is the one I'm most keen on. So he'll be in my other sides too. So just be aware of that when you're looking at it. Just thought I'd mention that there too, mate.
Nah, awesome. And Harris, what is it? Has also mentioned that Hugh McCluggage is expected to be back this week. When I was looking, it was that he's going to be touch and go if he plays. You guys might be cautious. Have you guys got word on the fact that McCluggage is back? Because that probably changes a bit of things in terms of the Brisbane midfield dynamic as well.
Yeah, I haven't heard much about it at all. The last thing I know is that he keeps getting pushed back and back and back. Yeah. If he does, it'll be interesting to see what his time on ground looks like or what his role will be. You would imagine he'd slot straight back into what he has been doing, but it will change a few things up. It's something that I'll probably look at over the coming days in a bit more detail. But as you can see in my squads, like I don't have a Brisbane Lion player in there. Like it's going to be the Ashcroft boys in the 22s, but it's probably about it at the moment. So yeah, it'll be great to have him in there from a footy perspective and have him back if that's the case. But yeah, if you've heard of anything more, mate, feel free to chuck that back in the chat as well, because that is something to keep an eye on. And then the other thing we've got as well there too in our little show here tonight, we've got our consensus primetime team. So a big shout out to the Stats Lab there, JT at the Stats Lab, doing some amazing work. We had a bit of a chat beforehand, Janath, before we came on about how good that data is. So massive shout out to them and the ongoing support they've got for the Fantasy Bros. Make sure you head to the statslab.app and check out all that awesome data they have available. They've got player stats from every game. They've got matchup strength, player comparisons, heaps of analysis tools to help you dominate the GameDay Squad platform. So check that out. That is for sure. And you can see there, mate, on the weekend, I packed a nice diamond Wayne Miller. So he goes straight into my primetime team as my little dart. You can see I've got a Nick Newman there too, Jordan Clark we've spoken about, a Josh Worrell, of course, as well. And yeah, again, this is probably the best team we can put together at the moment, prioritising other competitions. We're still building, but best part about GameDay Squad, mate, is you get in and you win prizes. I think for the last few weeks, I've won a 9-player rare pack each week. So, if you're getting that across the course of a season, you build your club, and yeah, it's probably the best part about GameDay Squad.
Can't complain with this team, mate. Looks very, very solid across the board. And I do like that you got the Lockie McAndrew Platinum there as well. Very, very sought after card this week.
Yeah, absolutely. With the ruck selections we have available and the form he's in, absolutely. And that gold Riley Thilthorpe might have to come out too. Might have to put him somewhere else. We'll see how we go. Now, mate, I'm in form. BroDown ShowDown. I got up last week, and I'm very excited about that. We obviously had Nick Dacos was laid out, so we had to figure out what this meant. We figured this out after the fact. I actually forgot completely that he was in the BroDown ShowDown. So we actually ruled out the Dacos and Sheasel matchup. We said, let's not go there. We'll just make it out of the other three. And I was able to get up. So I had Dane Zorko 141 over Hazard's Josh Dacos with 100. And Zach Bailey had 133 over his Josh Rochelle. And obviously Sarong showed that he was the better docker on the night, with Brayshaw saving that score late. So that got me a win, and I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to spin our wheel. You're actually on this one. So you're on there, mate. You got behind me last week.
I think I've been Team Pitty. Been Team Pitty all year, mate. Every week.
That's what it's about. I don't think you will be when you see our selections for next week.
I'm just kidding.
Right.
Love you, Haz.
Let's roll this, mate. I'm going to again, this 9-player common all-star pack, I'm just going to give away the whole thing, and this will probably be the last time I do, so I've got to try and keep some of those cards for myself.
Legend.
So Maxi has scored himself the 9-player common all-star pack. Well done, Maxi. So I'll jump across here now, and I'll share my screen. Just missed out there, Janath. You've had some great pack luck there too, by the way, mate, in the Discord, ripping those packs. Been really good to see.
All the prize packs, actually. So very happy with that, actually.
Yeah, it's unreal. Hey, let's see what we can get. Maxi, these are all yours. Let's hope there's an all-star.
Come on, Maxi.
I love the sound effect there. All right, come on. Please be an all-star for Maxi. Let's see what we've got.
Oh, that's right. Some goals. Handy goals, though. Come on. Give me some handy goals.
Yeah,
there you go. Handy silver.
Jordan Dawson silver. There you go. What else have we got? Molia from the Cats, Fawcett from the Tigers.
I think he looked quite good on the weekend, actually.
And Alex Davies from the Suns. Yeah, 22's eligible, maybe?
I think so.
Should be. We've got a gold Liam Henry, Asava Radaglia, and McDonald as well there. The wrong McDonald from the Hawks.
Ooh.
Kyle and West. So not a great finish to the pack there. Sorry, Maxi, but that Jordan Dawson, mate, that is a great pull. So again, any of those cards, they're all yours. Maxi, hit me up in the Discord. Let me know if you want 1, 2, 3, or all of them, and you can have those there. And thanks for getting behind me. But I will not be surprised if you go against me this week. I'll show you. I'll show you now who we've got. I had a blunder. So this is the Gather Round edition. We've got Ash up against Sicily. So I've gone for that pod play there. We came to pick in the midfield. I saw Jack Steele. I had stars in my eyes. I love Jack Steele, and I didn't go past that matchup, and I forgot that Bailey Smith plays the Eagles. So I think I've cocked it up there. And then obviously he had first pick there in the ruck. So he's gone Gorn, I've gone Grundy. And then we've got Myers up against Pickett. So chuck it in the chat. Who do you think is going to get up next week? Remember, it's best there. So you've got to get 3 to win. If it's 2-2, it's going to be whoever's got that highest scorer. So we've got TCB in the chat. Janath, you have a think there, mate. Yes, I will be judging you if you don't say me. TCB's gone Has.
Pitty, I give you the benefit of the doubt normally, but this is... You've somehow given Has, Ash, Smith, and Gorn. So.
Look, he took Ash and Gorn with his first pick.
Yeah,
the only pick I've cocked up is that Bailey Smith one. As I said, I saw Jack Steele, and I just I love watching
Jack Steele is into a very good matchup. You never know.
Yeah, that's it. And
it feels wrong to say Has when I'm on with you, so I'll stand by you, Pitty. Come on.
Nah, go for it.
Back in the pods, mate.
Yeah, are you going for you're going for me because I'll write your name down, mate.
I'll back in the pods. There we go, Pitty.
All right. I love that. Love the support. We've got Has, he's backing himself as well, so I'll chuck him on if he wins. He'll be on that as well. We had a laugh about that last week. Nate Daddies, he's going me. Thank you very much, mate. Appreciate that.
Nate Daddies.
And Mel's, she's going Has. Can't blame you there, Mel's. And again, it's so good having you in the chat. Hey. I am the pod in the BroDown Showdown.
That's got to be next week, mate. Surely, Pitty. Next week, pod BroDown Showdown. All players under 15% at time of whatever you choose.
Had this exact message today. We said from next week we've got to do that pod play, or you can't be picking in those top tier players. We've been enjoying the themed BroDown Showdown editions, and the next one could be the pod plays, and who knows, maybe we could have an over 30s. One time as well. We'll see. We're happy to take some suggestions there as well. And G'day Skip in the chat there. He's going Has. As I said, I think that's a great shout. Now, mate, let's wrap up a big episode. Yeah, we've done 22s. We've done Sunday Showdown, Prime Time. Can easily go back to those as well throughout the course of the season. So just for all our new viewers, make sure you get on board GameDay Squad, best fantasy platform going around by far. Best prizes to win. Use that code on screen, FBAR26. And this has been a massive live round 5 preview show. Janath, thank you so much for joining us, mate. Next week, we're coming to you 7:30 p.m. Wednesday, 15th of April to preview round 6. And we're going to have Roscoe on that one, which I'm very excited to have. Haven't had him on the pod just yet. But you talk about form, that man, he's in form at the moment. So I'm looking forward to be chatting to him as well, particularly after chatting to yourself tonight. Do you want to quickly remind the viewers, mate, where they can find you across the socials?
Yeah, so we're on I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, the Super Coach Swordplay YouTube channel. But we put out the Swordplay GameDay Squad GDS AFL podcast weekly as well. So you guys can find us there for whatever fantasy content that you want to consume. Also on the Discord, if you guys have any questions or any trades that you want to make, just hit me up in the DMs, and very happy to help you out. And thanks, Pitty, for having us on. And thanks as well for putting the data together. It was a great, brilliant episode, I reckon.
Awesome. No, thank you, mate. We really appreciate your time and your insights as well, and everything you do for the fantasy community. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. We love your support. We truly do, and wish you all the best for this week with round 5, and obviously with our cup matchups. And hopefully there's not as many bullets going around. We'll see you all